Chris Rickard. I'm a software engineer, I guess. I'm still calling myself a software engineer. I have founded three companies. So, startups in the early days, so in my early 20s. I may not look it, I am 43 years old. So I say I look young, which I really like. I want more of that. Um, so, startups in the early piece. And then I sort of went into working for digital agencies and consultancies and worked my way up to like a CTO sort of level. So, I was CTO for quite a few years. And then left working for the man to start my own software consultancy. So in 2012, I started my own business, ran that, and that was in engineering sense. So I was working on the tools, but quite quickly I realized that I need to grow the team. So I moved more into a managerial role, and then I hired some managers, and I realized the space missing was really that business analyst role. So kind of self-taught business analyst, really. So I did as much as I could quite quickly to understand and read all I could. And my day-to-day role was like requirement solicitation, working with large companies. So I should have said I'm Melbourne-based, so working with some large businesses and government companies here in Melbourne to do big, boring software projects for many years, which I say boring. I actually really loved it. Boring in the sense of lots of internal politics and this sort of thing, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with. So yeah, I ran my business until 2022, where we were acquired by a larger consultancy, and I wasn't too sure what I was going to do then. I took some time off, jumped in a motorhome with my wife, and did Australia for 12 months. And I was like, do I still like computers? I'm not sure. I was having a little midlife crisis for a second. But one of the things that I really came back to was a bit of sort of a pivotal point in my journey was moving from being a software developer to really being more into the requirements and realizing that it's not the quality necessarily or the code that solves the problem. It really is ensuring you're building the right thing and you're communicating that clearly across the organization. So I realized I wanted to do something in this realm. I tried a few little things back and forth, but the third business is Userdoc, which is the company that I run now. So yeah, founder and CEO of Userdoc, which is I should be better at pitching it. It's a requirements management tool that's infused with AI. So we tackle the problem of elicitation of requirements, business knowledge, how to communicate that. I'll touch on that in this talk. I do want to preface this. This is not a sales pitch by any means. I hate those. I'm not a fan of those talks that are sales pitches in disguise. But also, even though I'm a bit humble, I will be showing the product and running through what we can do. But I certainly want to say there are alternatives out there, and there's a lot you can do. What I'm really interested in is the intersection of AI and software requirements, whether that's using my platform or any platform. Um, yeah. Anyway, enough about me. What I was curious about, first of all, I see there's a lot of people that have joined here. Maybe just a raise of hands if you can on Zoom or a reaction about how many of you here um, work in software requirements. So I know BA is a large role, but how many people work in software requirements? So yeah, if you go to reactions, you can put your hand up. Yep. So I see quite a few are putting their hands up. Awesome. And how many of you have used any AI tools to kind of help with this, sort of facilitate this? So, not a few. I see some shaking heads. I find it really interesting because before I jump into like slides and stuff, I'm actually like an AI accelerationist. I use it daily. I use it 20, 30 times a day. My team, who are software developers, we use it to write all this code. And I use it to, help businesses build out requirements and stuff. So I can sometimes be misconstrued into thinking that everyone is using it. But what I often find when speaking about it is whilst people are interested and are experimenting on the fringes, in day-to-day life, we're not all using it. So I like that I ask those questions because it's quite interesting that we can see we've got a diverse audience here. So what I'll do is I'll just share my screen and I want to run through a bit of an overview of the landscape. We're going to sort of start from the start about, what types of problems AI can solve. I'm going to run through what type of knowledge an AI model would need from a business to solve this, because I'm really, whilst I am an AI accelerationist, I'm a very big proponent of this, I'm also a huge advocate of humans in the loop, right? We're not replacing jobs, we are augmenting jobs. That's something that I do every single day. So we're going to run through like what we need and the challenges we might face. I'll then talk about like how AI can help what we have today and what we do day to day, but also into the future. I'll give a bit of a demo of Userdoc and what we've built to kind of try and tackle some of this. Again, not all of it, but just like a little slice that we're tackling. And then yeah, at the end, some Q&A. So please keep questions ready or pop them in the chat and we can go back and talk about it. But I'll just quickly share my screen. Cool. So I think we've just answered those questions, so that's nice and easy.
Yep.
So what I want to sort of start off with is a statistic, which might be interesting to some of you guys. It's interesting to me, but I'm very much well into the field, which is 70% of software requirements today can be created using AI. So that's a large statement. So let me I'll unpack this a little bit, right? So I'm not talking about 70% of this giant project, all these requirements and all the conversations and back and forth and confirmations. I'm talking about actual writing or creation of these requirements once you've got the bits and pieces you need. Now, this statistic is not a statistic you'll find very often online, or it's not, published. It's quite a little niche. Little software requirements and AI is a bit of a niche. So how I found this out was it's actually a study that was done by Infosys, one of the world's largest software consultancies, and they compared their manual methods to the Userdoc platform. So they ran this study side by side before deciding whether to go down this path. And what they found is 70% of those manual, time-consuming tasks can be done, and the 30% where humans add real value and nuance that we do best can be overlaid on top of that. Now, I wanted to start with that as a stat before jumping into it, because it's really interesting. And what I'm going to unpack along the journey is how that can actually be done. So I'm sure a lot of us know this, but just to set the scene, I want to run through very briefly what are software requirements, right? So I'm going to quickly dive through this. So really, they're a blueprint of the system. So what we're building, what it needs to do, how it should function. Foundational for development, right? So clear guidance for the end users and the developers, ensuring business needs are met and expectations are set, which is super important, right? Along the expectation line, they're a bridge between the stakeholders, facilitating communication, making sure everyone's aligned and on the same page. And once we've done this, requirements, there's an interesting term where requirements often turn into documentation, right? There's a point once they've been delivered. So they turn into a long-term reference. So throughout the project lifecycle, they might be changing, but once it's delivered, they become a reference point where people can join the project, they can see what has been done, which helps with future updates and maintenance. So that might be very boring and obvious to you guys, but I just want to set the scene for what we're about to talk about next. We do have a problem in this field, which is quite a large one, which is in fact that 50%, half of all software projects fail due to issues with software requirements. This is a pretty staggering statistic here. This was done by an IBM study, right? So they studied actually thousands of software projects, the root cause analysis. It's not problems with resourcing or time constraints. It's actually software requirements, which is the fundamental issue for over half of software requirements. Now, where that comes from is there's a few key problems. First and foremost, unclear requirements. You guys are probably pretty familiar with this. Situations where they don't clearly define, there's things missing, they lead to misunderstandings and ultimately missed expectations, which is an important key point. Incomplete requirements. So when critical details are not there, stakeholders need to make assumptions, often leading to rework later on. And lastly, misaligned requirements. So they might be clear and they might be complete, but they don't align with the end user goals. They don't meet what needs to happen. They're just a little bit off the mark and they don't solve the problem, causing a disconnect between expectations and delivery. And the visible cost of this is really, 60% longer to deliver, which is a crazy statistic. Software with poor requirements takes 60% longer, ultimately costs 60% more. And this is one of my, from working in software consultancies for many years, I've seen this firsthand, but this statistic was from a Standish report from the large organization. It leads to 80% more rework. So poor requirements actually lead to 80% more rework after delivery. So you've wasted time delivering and the costs are, blown out. And ultimately there's 80% more down the path. And this is obviously a huge financial burden. So the US alone spends $30 billion every single year fixing issues that are caused by software requirements. This is from a US study. We don't have worldwide studies, but a conservative estimate, we could say like $100 billion worldwide, which could feasibly be spent fixing software requirement issues. And the hidden costs behind the scenes are we don't often think of this as a requirement issue, but scope creep, right? Something we often deal with where you think the project continually grows and we can't get it, we can't rein it in, right? But what often that is a side effect of is not actually having the correct requirements in the first place. When you don't have a clear boundary, it seems like scope creep is creeping all the time. This ultimately leads to reduced product quality and customer sad face dissatisfaction, right? So this is where we're heading. And lastly, I want to talk about something clear to close to my heart, which is what happens to the requirements after implementation. So you work on a very large system, large scale, takes many, many months to scope it, many years to implement. And then what happens with all that effort, all that requirements that should turn into documentation and reference points? Ultimately and commonly, they become outdated. They don't get updated. They're fine for a couple of minutes or a couple of hours. And as soon as someone taps someone on the shoulder to make a quick decision, these become out of date. And when they become out of date, they become untrustworthy. And if you can't trust documentation, then you stop looking for it and you don't know where to turn. Or maybe you have lots of scattered knowledge on SharePoint and Teams and Confluence or wherever your knowledge bases live, right? And they become unfindable. Now, I'm not sure if that's a word, but I'm coining it here today. So if you can't find your documentation, you don't know what's done, and you've got all these issues, like in my experience, my lived experience, I'm confident in saying that I believe that businesses have an issue with software requirements. It's a huge problem. We could be doing better. We should be doing better. But also, I'm pretty confident that AI will help solve this. I said solve this here. I should say help solve this. And what I want to talk about next is where AI can come in to help us, relieve some of these problems that we're facing every single day. So, how AI can build better software requirements? Ultimately, I think it can be a deep knowledge of business context, right? So it can historical data, project goals, user needs. AI can be that oracle we can turn to. It can obviously help generate requirements. Like if you go to ChatGPT right now and say, build me 10 user stories about Facebook for dogs, it'll do exactly what you say because it's very confidently incorrect. It's a junior intern that'll never say no to you. But let's go beyond that. Let's build real software requirements that are clear, concise, relevant, aligned with your end users. Importantly, I'm going to reiterate humans in the loop. This is not a replacement technology, it's an augmentation technology. We have control, it speeds up our process, and it does, hopefully, what we don't want to do. Um, Other active things like proactive issue detection, right? AI can help us detect issues long before they turn into 80% project rework or $30 billion spent per year. Maintaining requirements. So no one likes maintaining documentation, gets out of date, becomes untrustworthy. AI can help with this, I believe, as well, which is something, everyone loves documentation, but as soon as you talk about, well, who's going to keep it up to date, everyone starts, talking about something else. And lastly, I think AI can help build that single source of truth, which is a bit of a buzzword right now. There's many systems claiming to be a single source of truth. And I think ultimately, what we need is some overarching technology or whatever it may be to bring in all these disparate sources of information. Now, I'm going to run through each of these points quickly and talk about how I think anyway, AI could help solve or tackle each of these problems, right? So, for it to understand your business and what it does, what do we need to understand? So, it would need to understand your business model, the services, the products you provide. So, if you had an AI model that really understood this, it would be beneficial. This is what I'm sort of talking about here. Now, how could it understand your project, right? It needs to understand specific things like objectives, requirements, obviously, when you're trying to achieve it, what you're trying to achieve, this sort of thing. For this, it also needs to understand stuff that you guys would use as BAs daily, like constraints and business rules. ChatGPT can't just write your user stories for your project if it doesn't understand your limitations, your technical, your operational constraints, what your business constraints are. It also needs to understand, whether you have specific technologies, architectures, integrations in mind. So these are like more in the technical realm. But it really needs to also understand your end user needs, right? The challenges, the goals, what your end users care about ultimately. Otherwise, it'll just come up with some confidently incorrect answer, which I say that a lot, right? Because AI is never going to say no to you. It's always going to return a result. It's about whether it's correct and how aligned it is with humans. And lastly, it would need to understand like how humans interact with the system, right? So touch points, visually, like these are if we tackle these inputs, these are the types of things that AI would need to do to be a vital team member, which is more than just typing something into Copilot or ChatGPT. Now, how I've spent a long time thinking about is how could AI actually get this info, right? So, what inputs could we give it to help it understand as from a holistic view, right? So, for business and what it needs to understand, like an overview, so an internal doc. Say, for example, you work at a bank like ANZ, what would it need to understand how this business works? Descriptions of your product, services, how it operates. People have this documentation. So that, in my mind, that's kind of easy. For us, but on a project realm, it would need to get like a specification doc. And many businesses write these sort of things in order to even get them off the ground, right? So to get backing from the CEO or whoever needs to get an initiative off the ground, you need some type of specification or pitch. So most businesses have this. Let's say the project now is now undergoing and you've got a bit of a project management plan. These are governance, constraints, organizational requirements. If we have this knowledge and we could feed it to an AI, then it's starting to go, all right, it can piece this, we're layering this information, right? Similarly, with technology, we have a tech spec or even source code. Let's say you're doing a digital transformation. Source code of existing systems, diagrams, architecture information. If we could feed this into an AI, we're now starting to get a lot more information about how it could be helpful. But again, end users, right? Bringing it back to humans involved, we need the end user info, their goals, their frustrations. What does it mean for them? Why are we doing this? Keeping it user focused. And lastly, how they interact with the system. I'm thinking UI designs, sketches, mock-ups, diagrams on a whiteboard. If we could feed all this information into an AI model, we're starting to talk about what a team has today, what we work with as humans, and how we could, I'm painting the picture of what a future could look like with AI. And some of it's here today. And out of this, what software requirements could we generate? Now, there's a lot here, but I'm going to quickly user personas, right? When we have this info, we know what the goals and frustrations are. We can build personas to help the team really understand our end user needs. We can build out epics, so large initiatives or project goals, high level overviews of what needs to be accomplished. In there, user stories, right? As a user type, I want to achieve this so I can blah, blah, blah. These are the scenarios that we need to implement from a human-centric approach. Within there, acceptance criteria. What needs to happen? These bullet points that we need to deliver to the business to achieve these goals. AI would be great at this if we gave it that input. But there's other things we need to take into account, right? So non-functional requirements, right? These are security, performance, usability, accessibility. These are also things that AI would need to generate for us to to do that 70% mark that I was talking about. Some things like user journeys, so mapping out an experience of a user through the system on a timeline. This is something that we do very often to communicate it to stakeholders. This would be a great outcome from this. And lastly, test cases. So test cases are not often looked at as software requirements, but I've always lumped them in because really they're just the quality assurance for your requirements. They are testing your requirements. AI can generate all of these in from an end-to-end fashion across the SDLC. We're starting to see how we can move quite fast. Now, where should humans be in the loop? This is super important right now, right? So AI assistant, not a replacement. We're augmenting, we're not replacing. It's a great first draft. We're looking at 70%, 80% of maybe getting some stuff out there that's a draft for us to work with. We still are saving days of work and we're focusing on what we do best, which is humans and the nuance and communication and like our special sauce. We need full transparency and control. We need to reject or accept anything an AI model returns. We can't just let it make ubiquitous decisions across the board. We need to be in control there, right? It needs to empower collaboration, not replace it. A starting point for discussion. This should be a workshopping tool that we can sit with our team and have conversations around, right? Go to origins of agile, right? It's about conversations, it's not replacing. And an iterative feedback loop. AI should be continuously improving based on what we give it, based on our impact. AI can affect proactive issue detection. It can help us do better, clear, complete requirements, which I talked about, aligned with end user goals. So that'll help proactively solve some of the problems I introduced at the start. It'll be an early warning system, bringing stuff right up to the forefront that doesn't happen later on. It can help us align with standards and compliance like HIPAA, GDPR, etc., and ultimately improved quality insurance. I think quality insurance is such a big part of what we do. A lot of it is about getting better requirements up front, making sure they're aligned, but also testing it on the other end. And AI is actually really good at this sort of thing. How can it help maintain, requirements? How can documentation not get out of date? Locate knowledge in our businesses from disparate sources. It can facilitate making changes and updates to requirements. Things get out of date usually when Devon in the engineering department goes and makes a big change to some algorithm or web page and no one updates the documentation and now it's out of sync and now it's too hard. But if AI can help with this, then we stay on top of it. It can help adding new features to existing systems and those requirements. And it can point out duplicate information, duplicate user stories. Contradictory information is also really important. And ultimately understands the requirement history, what we're building out here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second and jump into a quick demo. So how do I do that? Wait, hold on. Stop sharing. Jump over to this screen. So I'm going to quickly show you Userdoc, and I want to show how we are tackling some of these issues right now. It's not all of them by any means. A lot of them we still are really passionate about doing. Sorry, I'll just share the right screen. But I want to show you where we are in the process. So what we're looking at here is the main user interface of Userdoc. We can go down the path of generating new software requirements or translating existing source code into documentation. So new systems, existing systems. What I'll run through really quickly is new software requirements. So I'm going to use this facilitated wizard, which is a quick few easy steps. I'm going to run through it very fast. I'm going to build a new project called Atlantis Healthcare Management System, HMS. Now, let's say this is a project built by a medical company. I work for a consultancy or I work for this medical company, and we've already got a brief. The next screen is asking us, I can type in what I'm looking for, or I can upload any supporting documentation. So I'm going to show you here, this is the system requirements doc, big boring doc. You're probably all familiar with this, took someone a lot of time. Business has signed it off. We've got stakeholders, scope, bit of functional requirements, bit of blah, blah, blah. We're going to take this document and I'm going to upload it. So I'm just going to choose that here. I'm choosing the systems requirement doc, and Userdoc is now going away and it's going to come back with a really succinct summary. So Atlantis HMS is a healthcare management system, streamlined patient appointments, scheduling, EHR management, HIPAA compliance, etc. Now we can change this and be the human in the loop, but for brevity, I'm going to skip through this quite fast. Next, Userdoc is going to come back and suggest the end users involved in this system. So we're saying it's looked at that knowledge and it's saying patient. So patient, schedule appointments, access the EHR, view lab results, etc. Receptionists, they use it to manage appointment calendars, assist with patient inquiries. You can add more user types. You can type them in yourself, or you can use AI to help suggest the next one. Now, I have some insider knowledge because I wrote that requirements doc. I know there's actually one more, which is the service provider. This is the doctor or the nurse that actually interacts with you. So again, I'm going to continue to the next step. And this is just asking, do you want to use AI to scaffold your requirements? Now, many of our customers at that point, they want to upload their user stories from Jira or anything else, but I'm going to let AI go and suggest, right? So what it's doing right now, we're taking the documents that we uploaded and we're looking at best practice systems, and we're coming back and suggesting the features that could be involved in the system. Now, this isn't hallucinated, made up AI stuff. This is grounded in what you've uploaded. So if you didn't upload a document, that's fine. You can just simply type in the project you're looking for, and many people do. But if you do have knowledge about what you've built, different types of documentation or just scribbles on a whiteboard, you can upload that and you're going to come back with a summary like this. So this is saying for the patient, the receptionist, and the service provider, we've got these features. It's suggesting register, log in, recover your account, search for an appointment, schedule an appointment, message your provider, etc. You can click on these and you can look for a bit more info. So for the registration feature, we've got these fields: name, date of birth, insurance details, company info. Afterwards, create your account. We can change this. We can say, we want single sign-on with Azure, whatever we want to do as our business analysts. We know AI is not perfect, right? This is the first draft. We can delete them. We can add completely new features. But this is just a really quick summary at the start. So I'm going to breeze through this. The next screen is quite simple. It's saying, well, what are the goals and frustrations of these end users, right? We know it's not all about technology. We need human outputs. The AI needs to understand the humans. So again, if you've done customer research, we can enter the goals of the patient, the frustrations of the patient, but our AI models can also help suggest this. So I'm gonna lean on AI quite heavily here, even though I've just talked about humans being in the loop. I'm gonna lean on it very quickly to get through this. So it's coming back and it's going to suggest the goals and frustrations for a patient, and in this case, saying schedule appointments, access their health records, their frustrations along wait times for appointments, difficulty getting information, same as receptionists and service provider. Now, once we've generated these, the next screen is quite simple. It wants one example user journey through the system. Now, this is to understand the boundaries of what's involved in a software system, because AI will be, again, confidently incorrect sometimes. So we want to describe what, a journey across a timeline. So, but this is a healthcare system. It's like a patient signing up, looking for a doctor, scheduling an appointment. Then the nurse comes in, the receptionist, confirms, blah, blah, blah. They meet with their provider, etc. Again, I'm going to use AI to come and give back a draft suggestion here. But I know this system and I know what I would expect as a business analyst. And I know that it's going to be within these realms. So patient logs in, schedule an appointment, get their results, check messages, reception looks at it, etc. EHR records, HIPAA compliance, insurance claims. So this is just a broad level summary. Now I'm going to say finish, but I should just point out this took me a couple of minutes. Many of our customers spend 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours in this, and they use it as an ideation piece to replace some of their whiteboard sessions or talk with their customers. But I'm going to click finish, and this will take anywhere between 30 seconds and 2 minutes, depending on the size of the system. But I've got one I prepared earlier because I'm a consummate professional. This is what we're going to end up with after that is loaded. This is the main user interface of Userdoc, and we're in the Atlantis healthcare management system. And we've got 62 software requirements down here on the left-hand side, ranging from patient login, register, to viewing their insurance claim, everything there. And I can select one of these, and I'll select login. And I see my user story. As a patient, I want to log into this system so I can access my healthcare information and services. I then see very detailed acceptance criteria, which has been created for me. So I see a login form with username and password. I see, it's a text field. It's got a constraint. It's required and it must match a registered username. I see forgot password. And if you click that, it goes to account recovery. And you can see that this requirement actually has a link in it, right? You click account recovery and it takes me to the account recovery feature. So we're building an interactive map between our requirements. And if I look at concepts like the user register, which is a bit more complex, it's got name, username, password. We've got a link to our password policy that it's sectioned off into a whole different requirement. If we want to go to user registration and we say, okay, again, this is the first draft, right? We're talking 60, 70, 80%. But I know that there's an issue here, right? I know that I wanted something that it didn't do, which will happen all the time. I can easily edit this. I can come in and make my changes myself, or I can use AI to help with this. So I can say, let's make a change using AI. And I'm going to say, remove the company fields because it had like company name and stuff. I don't really care about that for registration. Add option for Google single sign-on. My spelling is going to be terrible. That's okay. We get the point. AI is very forgiving. And send a email confirmation after login. Now, I don't know why you do that, but I'm just saying it. You put me on the spot. So my point is here, we can use AI here to do change management, come back and suggest changes to our existing requirements. And it doesn't just do this, ad hoc. It actually uses all your information about your system to come and suggest best practice. So what we're seeing here is it's saying, well, in red, it's suggesting we take this away, which is what I asked it, the two company name fields. And I could have been much more detailed. I could have got it to do many changes here. And it's also in green is what it's suggesting we're actually adding to it, which is Google single sign-on. On click, you redirect to schedule appointment. So it knows where things will go. So we can make these changes. We can accept and reject them and save them and so on. We can also generate test cases. So for registration, it's gone ahead and made registering with valid details. You're on the registration page as a precondition. Here are your steps. Enter a name within this guideline, select a date of birth, etc., etc., etc. Finally, you click register. patients created, verification email sent, you're redirected to schedule appointment. That's the happy path. That's the valid. But then it also tells you the other ones, like registration with duplicate username, and you're expecting an erroneous result. So off the bat, in about 2 minutes, I've generated this amount of work. So user requirements, we can also make whole new requirements, which you can imagine. So I can say, what's a good example? Cancel appointment. I don't think we have a cancel appointment feature. Seems pretty obvious. I can say I want this a patient, a receptionist, or a service provider to be able to cancel an appointment. So multiple level user stories. Quickly let AI go and generate the user story for us. So I want to cancel the appointment so I can free up slot for someone else for my schedule. Perfect. Now I can generate acceptance criteria. I can generate with context where I could have a chance to say what I want. I could say I want it over email, SMS, whatever that is. But I'm going to just say, AI, go and have the first crack at it, right? So this is what we've come back with in about 5 seconds. Shows a list of upcoming appointments, including this information. This isn't hallucinated. This is info in the system about an appointment. Shows a cancel appointment button. When you click it, shows a confirmation. If no selected, blah, 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 goes back to the old screen. But if you click yes, cancels it, sends a confirmation based on their chosen method, updates the system status, frees up the appointment slot, shows a success message, removes it from the upcoming appointments, depending on their role, takes them to 3 various screens. So it understood that a patient, a receptionist, and a service provider can do these things. And if the different end users do it, they'll go to different screens after it, right? Again, first draft, but a pretty amazing first draft, even though I'm biased because I own the business. What I'm getting at here is we've just built something super fast. Now, let's say it's not all about requirements for documentation. Let's say we're new to the business and we don't understand how all this works. It's a long-running existing project. I can ask questions, right? I can say, when is the late payment email sent? Email report. I think it's a report. I remember in the specification doc, I have something about this. So if we've gone and produced requirements correctly, it knows this knowledge, right? So we can ask this question of Userdoc, and it comes back and says, there we go. It's sent weekly at 6 a.m. every Monday morning. Now imagine I'm new to the team, or I'm a software engineer and I work on many things and I just forget this business rule, right? Because it's just too big for me to keep in my head all the times. I can ask it and it actually tells me this is the reference requirement you need to look at. So it's the automatic late payment report that you need to look at, which says this information and what's in the report and what they get. So this is where AI can help as a knowledge base, maintaining long-term documentation over time, not just as an initial version, but throughout the SDLC. Now, I talk too much, so I'm going a bit over time, but I'll quickly say we've also generated user personas. So patient, Liliana, she's 33 from Melbourne. She enjoys, fitness enthusiast. Her goals are to stay informed about her coverage and manage medical appointments, and obviously her frustrations with finding slots that fit her schedule, etc. If you guys understand this, if you've ever worked in the UI UX realm or familiar with personas, this is the reason why Liliana is a potential customer for the business. This is a great point of documentation as well, right? So new people join a project, they want to see who are the end users. Why do we care about this? Why does the receptionist care about these problems? We've also generated one example user journey, which is, it's Liliana actually, interfacing with this system across the timeline. So Liliana logs in after breakfast. She decides to, do a medical checkup. She goes to the website. She visits patient login. So we're seeing that this feature is being interacted by this user persona on a timeline. Eventually, these steps in the journey, they come and the receptionist gets involved and they start, schedule her appointment. She meets with the service provider, Amara. They do the consultation. Eventually, she gets her insurance claim. This is not just great for requirements, but it's an amazing source of long-term documentation. And again, AI generated this. If I had a bit more time, I could show you generating entirely new user journeys with AI with one click or generating new steps. But I think you can probably imagine that this is the type of things AI can help with. Now, what I've just shown you quickly was an example of a new software system, right? You've got the you've got the system specification, you might have technical specs, you can upload it, and systems like Userdoc can really help you jump to 80% super fast. It doesn't replace a human, but gets a lot of that menial, tedious work done because many systems are the same base concepts behind it. But what I haven't touched on is new software systems, right? Which is existing software system. which is something very close to my heart. So my software consultancy, we mainly did life extensions and replacements of version twos, right? So we would go in and we would study an existing system that's been in place for 15 years. We'd understand all the business rules and decisions that were made. We'd read documentation, we'd read source code, and we would help them figure out how to do a transformation, maybe over many years or a full replacement. Now, Userdoc, when I first built this, I don't think I've said this. I've been building this for 18 months. I've got a small team. We've been building this for close to 2 years now. We didn't do existing systems because it was very hard. But in the last 6 months, we have. And I want to take you through a quick example of what that looks like. So somewhere, oh yeah, this tab. This is a stark change of tabs. What we're looking at here is a very old piece of medical software called Wesis, and it is a radiology medical viewing system, which you can probably see here. So it's to view medical imagery, to make annotations, to put information on the images that is then shared across different healthcare professionals. Right? This is a very commonly used system worldwide. It's about 17 years old, and it's built in a very old programming language called Java that's still used today, but it's an old version of Java, and it's many hundreds of thousands of lines of source code. It's an open source piece of software, which is fantastic, which means it's free to use. And what that allowed us to do is use this to go, well, how could we reverse engineer existing software systems into detailed documentation? And that's the other part of Userdoc, right? So quickly, what I've done here in this demo, I can connect the source code to the private repository. We then go through, and these are all the source code files. You can select all the files from the system which are relevant, and any private source code files you don't want to include. The next step, there will be an estimate, a price estimate, because it does cost us quite a lot of bit of money in our AI bills. So let's say it's somewhere around a few $1,000s. You then confirm the high-level themes of the software system you're working on. It's very important with any AI tool that humans are in the loop, right? So this system has a plug-in architecture, image acquisition, image viewing, image processing. You go through and confirm this. You can edit it. You can make any changes. You can add new. And basically, once you all confirm them, you then go to the next step, which is the features. So it comes back and looks at the source code alone, right? So maybe if I didn't make that clear up front, this comes from the source code. We've used AI to come back and suggest all these features that exist with a brief little description, and you can confirm them, you can edit them. And ultimately, when you click next, it takes about 40 minutes to 2 hours, depending on the size of the system. But what you end up with is exactly what I showed you before. Super detailed documentation inside Userdoc. So this is 133 features in this system. If I click on one of these, you can see very highly detailed. So rotate image. As a radiologist, I want to rotate the image so I can view it in the desired orientation. And then this is the instructions, right? Displays this on this panel. It shows the slider. When you change the slider, this is what happens when it's dragged. When you click the button, this is what happens. The image rotates. If you reset it, it goes back to the original value. This information comes from the source code. So what we've just done is we've democratized the understanding of source code, which was only previously understandable by software engineers or a small part of the business, or very commonly, an old system is usually only understood by that grey-haired old bloke upstairs who's the only person you can talk to about this specific part because no one else knows how it works, right? That's the common scenario. But what we've just done in a few hours is we've given detailed instructions that the whole business can understand how this works. You can then ask questions of it. You can create new requirements like I showed you before. We've just onboarded a 17-year-old software system into human readable documentation in a matter of minutes. So yeah, I could go on a bit more with you. I'm a nerd, so I could talk about it all day. But those two things are like a quick overview of what I've done with Userdoc. I might stop screen sharing so I can see your faces again. In terms of like where I think this is heading, a lot of possibilities, undoubtedly. I'm very conscious that no AI tool right now can replace humans, and I don't think it can for many, I'm talking tens of years, right? What it can do is that low-hanging fruit that we do, which is data. So what I just showed you with that source code reverse engineering, that's not an impossible feat by any means. It would just take like a technical BA or a solution architect 6 months. So it's just speeding up some of that stuff, which isn't like, super important. What's super important in my mind is about product vision. It's about what we're doing as BAs and facilitators to help communicate that to all the different stakeholders and the terms we're putting it in. And if AI can speed that up, I think it's not a replacement, as I've said a few times, it's an augmentation tool. Now, in terms of like where I think in the next 10 years what it would look like, I think there will definitely be the visual aspect. So user interface design, your design teams, when they're mocking things up or trying to communicate stuff, that's obviously going to get very close to, helping build out requirements. And then we've already seen it, if you're familiar with like GitHub Copilot and these sort of tools, software development is already being, disrupted quite heavily. So my software engineers probably, I did a round table discussion last week. About 60% of our code today is being written by AI. And again, what that means is they're concentrating on the interesting bits, the things that are really tricky and really more solution architect, and not just that sort of simple form building or whatever that looks like. So I'm a big believer that over the next, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to see all the low hanging fruit of things that we do as communicators and elicitators of these requirements to be augmented by AI. Now, when businesses adopt that, will be very interesting. I talk daily with businesses who are interested in this, but not sure where to start. So, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about this. It's just as an AI, nerd. I also like this. My general advice is to start small and have an AI positive attitude about it. Start small, don't go too big. Don't try and solve the world's problems in a day. But start small and start spending, like with Userdoc, I always say, like a small project or an existing legacy project you want to get the documentation for. You don't need to jump in and bet the ranch on this stuff if you're not feeling comfortable about it. But we do need to start with an AI positive attitude. And what I mean by that is like, it's obviously an amazing tool, but if you try and get it to do too much, you'll get a bit of taste in your mouth, right? So it's like hiring a junior BA. If you go and give them the most important role on a technical project, and you're like, what? I can't believe you made this mistake. What do you mean you don't have this year's experience that I have? As this is the best way to treat it. But if you imagine you now have an army of junior BAs that can help you out, that's a great way to start thinking about it. So the problem I see a lot of businesses, I just went a bit off tangent, but the problem I see a lot of businesses right now is they're trying to get it to solve the world, where we need to start getting it to solve one problem, two problems, three problems, get comfortable, be positive as an organization, start going, well, where else can we jump in? I didn't mean to end with that note, but it's an important note, right? Because we're all thinking about, well, how do you adopt this? How does this fit into our actual, life cycle of how our business works? Because we've worked the same way for many years. So we're scared of disruption, and we don't know how to do it. Often the C-suite is saying we need to use it. Not sure how, but we need to use AI. It's on our strategy. We've got a plan this year. Roll it out, team. And everyone's like, I'm not too sure what we can trust, what we can turn to. And I deal with this daily because, I get a lot of people interested in Userdoc and not sure how to do it. So I do a presentation similar to this. I talk about our customers like Infosys that use it and how they're using it. I talk about our security and privacy, which I didn't touch on that. That's obviously a very large one. Safe to say, none of the info in Userdoc that you put in is used for any model training. It's not used to share with anyone else. There's zero chance that it is going to be used to affect a model. And there's no chance that any info you put in will be shared with anyone else. Now, not everyone is taking that stance. I take that stance to be bluntly truthful. We could probably build a better product if we did use your knowledge to help build state-of-the-art tools. But right now, that would be a ridiculous thing to take without anyone understanding it. And I came from a software consultancy, and I know that you can't just mess around with someone's requirements or the IP of this system is like super important, right? For some businesses, their whole company is on this algorithm and this product. So we don't go anywhere near that. It's multi-tenanted on a SaaS-based system, but there's no model training, no information is shared, and not everyone is like that. So when talking about what AI tools to use, it's very tricky. You need to definitely get security and privacy involved. Now I say that sounds like quite pessimistic, but I'm trying to say have a happy AI positive attitude. That is the one thing I would be very, it's very serious. So you do need to make sure whatever tools you adopt, be it ChatGPT, Copilot, you can make mistakes with all of them. If you don't have the thing properly set up with the proper plans and the proper privacy controls, it can use your information for training. You jump on ChatGPT, you upload your system spec, unless you tell it not to, it can use that for model training. If you pay for the Teams plan or above, it won't use it. But they're not advertising this information. People are not too sure. So it's one of those areas where you want to adopt it, you want to jump in, but you've got so many questions. Speaking of which, it's probably a good time to go to questions because I could talk for another hour and a half. So
Yeah.
maybe, yeah, anyone want to jump in with questions, or there's probably some in the chat. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, look, that was amazing presentation. I think you've just answered Helen's question around NDA information. So I think that's
Yep.
good. Yeah, her question was, yeah, I mean,
I should just mention there as well, like uh in a security privacy policy, we don't do any training, but for our larger enterprise customers, we actually have custom NDAs with them as well. So it's easy for us to do because we don't do the training, but obviously sometimes you actually need to sign something, which is fine. Yeah.
yeah, and I think we've got another good question from Sherry, which is around like the lead time required to upskill AI to understand like legacy languages, because often that's the use case, right? Where you want to
Yeah.
reverse engineer. It's all often legacy systems, which is written in all software
Yeah.
languages. So yeah, how does that yeah, let you answer that?
It's a really good question, and it's something I should show more often here. And I'm gonna answer this with a quick screen share. Um, so what we're looking at here is a COBOL system, very old attendee system written in COBOL, and this is the user doc reverse engineering of it. So the input to this was COBOL source code, and Userdoc has come back and said, this is what's on the screen. This is the algorithm. When you press F2, you go to this screen. When you press F3, you go to this screen. This is what happens when you go to this. So we built the products because we support COBOL, Fortran, Java. We're language agnostic. We can work with the most legacy old systems ever, which was our first trial. We've worked on 2 million line Visual Basic systems written 20 years ago, not just the modern stuff, because the modern stuff often doesn't have the problem. The modern stuff is new. Someone remembers it. They haven't moved departments or companies yet. It's the older stuff where you're moving slow and the cost of change is huge.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I've got another question from
Yeah,
Bart,
no worries.
which is around like I think this is a problem that I'm sure you face, right, where all most of the clients are already having an existing platform for requirements, which is either DevOps or
Yeah,
Jira. Like how do they like transition to user docs if required, right? Is the integration
definitely.
yep.
Great question. And I should have mentioned up front, like to be clear, Userdoc is a requirements management tool. It's not a project management tool. It does not replace DevOps or Jira or Asana. It is an augmentation tool. The real problem is if you use DevOps and you build a large software project and you have end up from like a 3,000 tasks that went from to do to assigned to done to see you later. Where's it gone? Where's the knowledge gone? Completely disappeared. You get a new employee on your project in 18 months. You don't say go back and read the 3,000 legacy DevOps tasks or Jira tasks. It's Jira or DevOps are not a source of knowledge that can be used long term. They are for implementation and they're transitory. They have a start and an end. So I should have shown this, that user doc requirement, you click one button and it's synchronized to Jira or DevOps. So we integrate with project management tools. You make a change, you click a button, it's updated. We've got versioning, full versioning. You see who made a change and when. So instead of making like 30 tasks in DevOps or Jira, you just update your single requirement and you synchronize it across. That's the problem with me. I talk too much and there's too much to show. I got to get better at it.
So good, thank you. Look, I've got another question from Nick, which is around any limitations around token size when ingesting these large old code bases.
Uh, Yes. So obviously you're technical. You understand that AI models have a token limitation, which for those who maybe don't get it, it's the amount of information you can send to an AI model. The smaller ones like OpenAI, GPT-4 can only take about 750,000 words, which sounds like a lot. But if we're talking like a 12 million line source code, it's actually not much, it's way over the context. So the way that we do it is we break your source code down into many different concepts and themes, and we build a full knowledge graph and interaction between how all your files work together. And the reason it costs thousands of dollars is because we do hundreds of thousands of AI communications back and forth to ultimately build your software. So the one requirement I showed you for that rotate image for the radiology software, looked, maybe, I don't know how many lines it was. It was maybe 100 words or something like this, where in actual fact, that probably involved, 30 source code files across back end, front end, and database. So there's a lot of complexity that goes on there. But yeah, we work within the limitations of the models. But the benefit of working in 2024 is in 6 months' time, the models will be 500% smarter than they are today. So we are standing on the shoulders of giants.
So thank you. Look, I think we've got a follow-up question from Sherry, which is regarding the reverse engineering from an old language. So
Yeah.
does the model have to be built for each code language, like for each type of code? Do you need to update the model?
Yeah, a really good question. So the answer is no. So originally, when I had this concept about 12 months ago, I worked with CSIRO and their data scientists, and that's what we were thinking. And to be honest, at that time, that's what we would have had to have done. With the advent of like GPT-4, which came out, so OpenAI's GPT-4, which is now not even their smartest model, it had such a deep understanding of these languages. We can just give it great examples and your source code in a very specific way, and it understands and can comprehend it. So again, that's the point, right? So this could not have been done 18 months ago. It would be completely impossible. There are tools that did similar stuff with like static analysis and looking at the source code, but there's nothing that could do, Fortran, COBOL, Java, .NET, PHP, all these languages. So it's a very interesting time right now.
Cool. Yeah. So one last question, probably. Can it also generate diagrams? Like I think the question is for Userdocs.
Yes. How about this? Talk to me in 2 months, and the answer will be yes. So it's a big point. It's one of the large things which is on our roadmap, right? So what we've done now is we've built this like base bit of knowledge from software, and sort of now we can use them as inputs for many different outputs. So diagrams is a big one. Whoever asked that question, I can't see in the chat, but please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to know the type of diagrams that you use so we can prioritize those. But yeah, it's something in the first quarter of 2025 that we're working on.
Oh yeah, that was Helen from Belgium that had that question.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Bart's suggesting that a data model diagram generation would be awesome. So you've got your first requirement.
Agree. Well, the beauty is that's one of the big things we have to do for building out that knowledge graph. We actually understand how your data flows through all your files in your system to build the acceptance criteria. So, the diagram is actually a funny one because it's the most asked for and the most like visually impressive. But the hard work was actually building the text representation of it. The diagram will be yeah, definitely coming soon. So thank you for that, Brett.
Cool. Look, I think you might have something to say for this one. So Ellen says like she's impressed but a bit worried as well. Like, do you have anything to say to that?
Yeah. Well, look, without knowing specifically why you're worried, I guess I'm gonna guess here and say the worry is possibly around how much we're doing, like how much you're doing for your job. Yeah, there you go. I see your answer, right? So I do have an answer for this, which is the best that we can do because I feel this daily as well, right? So the tools that I use in my business, I'm using AI as much, and I'm like, wow, it's not as defensible anymore, So my best answer is that we all just need to be curious with AI and experiment with AI and figure out how it fits in. We shouldn't be scared and we shouldn't be the deniers that it's not going to touch me and not going to affect me because it ultimately will. Now, there's a lot of existential stuff about how the world works after all this. Ultimately, I'm quite positive in the aspect that I think that humans will focus on what we do best, which is like community and it's conversations and it's future thinking and it's brain work. It's not finger work. It's not typing. All right, we weren't built to type on a keyboard. We were built to have conversations and think broad thoughts and do strategy, and this is what we can get more of if we use these tools. So I wouldn't look at it as so to your point specifically, Helen, don't look at it like perhaps your job is going to be made redundant. Start thinking of the way if you can augment yourself with these AI tools and perhaps suggest to your team, your business, how they could be introduced in a safe manner, a safe environment that people can get a positive outcome from it. They will start realizing that this is now just a tool that you wield in your tool belt, just as you wield other ways to express user stories or diagrams. These were tools that didn't once exist, but these things happened. So this is just a mechanism that you can use to move faster and either do more work or do higher leveraged work, more quality work where your brain is using more of what it was built for. That's my summary of it.
So, I think that was all the questions in the chat. Yeah, I just want to thank you for for your time and presenting us this. I think it's given us a taste of what the future could look like. And I'm sure like DevOps and Jira, they're probably all doing something similar, right? I'm sure you'd be
Yeah.
doing something like this. But yeah, I think
Yep.
it's about how we sort of embrace these technologies going forward. And yeah, so how we can, it's just about making us 10x better. I think that's what this is about. So,
Yep.
yeah,
Agreed.
definitely. Thank you for that.
Awesome.
And yeah, thanks to
Pleasure.
everyone.
And anyone, I should have said, Userdoc, if you Google it, you'll find it, but userdoc.fyi is our address. You can jump in, you get a 2-week free trial. You can have a trial of that wizard. You can go through the whole process. You can upload documentation. The source code, right now, you can't upload. It costs us a lot of money just in feasibility. But if anyone's interested in the source